Hello guys, it's me Willie Cuz and welcome back to Valiant Hearts, The Great War. This is Chapter 2. I hope you guys enjoyed Chapter 1, and if you have not had the pleasure of playing this game yourself, I recommend that you either do or enjoy my playthrough. God bless you all.
Anna was training to be a veterinarian when the war broke out. The Germans were only 20 miles from Paris when she received a letter from her father. He was in good health, but implored her not to return home to Belgium until the war's end. Patience, however, was not one of Anna's strong suits.
Ici ma meule! À la barre! À la barre! Demandez! Oh, ils ont tapé! Hey!
Voilà, Sia. Voilà. Courage, c'est bon. Pas mieux? Allez.
Merci, madame.
The Germans at the gate. In September 1914, the German advance took them to within 20 miles of Paris. The government had already fled to Bordeaux and was expecting Paris to fall. In the north, most of Belgium was occupied, but under the king's command, 75,000 soldiers kept Ypres and Isère out of German hands. September 6th and 7th, 1914, General Gallieni requisitioned 630 Parisian taxis to transport troops rapidly to the Marne. While relatively few soldiers were actually transported, 4,000 in all, 3% of the total number of men deployed in the battle, the impact on the public was huge. The event became a symbol of solidarity for the nation, and the Marne counterattack saved Paris from German occupation. Ballpoint pens were not developed until the 1950-1960s, so soldiers used a quill or nib to write letters. Ink was poured into an inkwell into which, in order to provide enough ink, the quill or nib had to be dipped regularly. Letter from a Belgian civilian living in Paris. Dear parents, we fled our land before the German advance to take shelter in France with the children. Unfortunately, the Germans kept coming forward, and Paris is practically under siege. If Paris falls, we shall return home to Liege. Your dear daughter, Matilda. A watch strap broken by a motor crank handle. Before battery ignition was developed, motor cars were started by cranking a handle. As the engine sparked into life, the operator had to let go of the handle smartly because the crank handle, now propelled by the engine, could cause a nasty accident. The main source of information was the newspaper. Radios were in their early days based on tube technology, and television did not exist. On top of local and national news, a news section appeared in the newspapers dedicated to the events on the front. Some newspapers also published daily listings of POWs and war dead.
September 7th, 1914. Taxis drove all night. Anna was proud to help the soldiers reach the front line. When Anna arrived at her destination, she discovered the horrible truth with her own eyes.
Fais-toi. Non. Hey, oh. Ok. Courage, Nebo. Voilà, c'est là. Voilà. Va mieux. Allez, courage. Allez. Courage, Nebo.
Dieu vous bénisse, madame.
7 months went by. Driven by compassion, Anna devoted herself, body and soul, to healing the wounded and the sick. Every life saved was another small victory over the war. The conflict, however, raged on.
C'est pas de là. Hey, violon, je vais l'attaquer à moi. Regarde, pour que nous. Hey, violon, je vais l'attaquer à moi.
Lèche-toi. Hé, non. Lèche-toi. Courage, Nebo. Voilà, viens.
Dieu vous bénisse, madame. Voilà son projet, mademoiselle. Oi, monkey. Voilà son projet, mademoiselle. Oi, mon poisson. Ah, Mzima.
Bravo, dégelé.
Voilà, courage, Nebo.
Mzima, ma belle. Dieu vous bénisse, madame.
The Hecatomb. The first 3 months of the war saw especially heavy losses. August 22nd, 1914 was the bloodiest day of the whole war, with heavy casualties. The number of wounded were far greater than had been anticipated, and the military health services struggled to cope with the scale of the conflict. Nurses were the angels of the Great War, and were generally volunteers recruited by the Red Cross, the Army, or the American ambulances to work along grueling shifts in hospitals, both at the front and behind the lines. They played the role of carers, mothers, and confidants. They often feature in soldiers' memoirs, and were sometimes their sole companion in death. The majority were demobilized at the end of hostilities. The war effort suddenly required a large medical corps, and there were not enough qualified personnel, so manuals were published and distributed to help volunteers train. The manuals provided a whole host of practical solutions to logistical and medical problems at the front, such as how to make a splint or stretcher using rifles and their straps. Socks soaked in refined tallow and coated with formol, the most effective way to beat the cold and damp, frostbite and other ailments. That, at least, was what the adverts had people believe. However effective the socks were, the soldier's best friend was always a nice dry pair. Shrapnel shell remnants, a shell containing lead bullets. Depending on its setting, the shell might explode on contact with the ground, sending its contents flying, or in the air for even more destructive results. In their journals, soldiers often recount their losing war against lice and rats in the trenches. Apart from lice powder, the only other prevention against lice was this fine-toothed metal comb. Often, when soldiers took leave behind the lines, they were scrubbed down with hot water, their clothing boiled, or new uniform issued. Both dishes of this mess tin have holes in them. Not hugely practical for eating perhaps, but life-saving for one soldier. The mess tin bag was worn at kidney height. When the shell exploded, this mess tin slowed down the searing hot shrapnel in flight, which, although it wounded the soldier, helped him live another day. Mess tins were blackened, using smoke to prevent them from glinting in the sunlight. Letter from a Prussian soldier. September 6, 1914. My dear daughter, we are making headway through the French countryside. The landscape is beautiful. I'd much rather be enjoying it with you than killing people. I think of you all the time. Your father, Wolfgang. The situation is horrific here. Yesterday I was in my warm, cozy apartment, and now I'm in the depths of hell. There are so many dead, so many young lives lost. I managed to save one soldier this morning, but there are so many others to tend to. Tomorrow I'll try to get closer to the front so I can help those most in need.
Oh, Buffalo. Mon père, mademoiselle. Si pas, mademoiselle. Marie. Danke.
Allez, courage. Voilà, viens. Courage, Nico. Va mieux. Allez, courage. Voilà.
Danke. Hey, guarda. No, non è buono.
The French officers were talking about Belgium. The German army was about to experiment with a new weapon near Ypres, Anna's hometown.
Papa!
Anna got en route to warn her father about the imminent danger. Reaching the outskirts of the city, Anna was greeted by the screams of sirens. The deadly gas was already here.
Débrouillé.
Allez, courage. Va mieux. Allez. Courage, Nico. Voilà, c'est Merci. Oh.
Ypres, a town in ruins. Dubbed Wipers by British troops due to its difficult pronunciation, the Belgian town of Ypres was a key strategic position during the war. A hub for road, rail, and canal networks, it became the target for sustained bombing from 1914. In 1915, the Germans even used chemical warfare on the town. By the end of the war, the majestic cathedral and town center were nothing but ruins. In the wake of the technological advances of the 20th century, the vast scope of this industrialized war brought developments in all fields: aircraft, submarines, dirigibles, and tanks. Great progress was made in the fields of medicine, surgery, medical hygiene, and radiology, thanks to Marie Curie's work, who took thousands of x-rays of the wounded. Wooden top with string, a common toy of the age. During the war, toys gradually became more war-based. Through board games, children could fight out famous battles while other items ridiculed the enemy. After the war, toys and games became more pacifist once more. Letter from a Scottish soldier. Hello, pal. I'm in the town of Ypres in Belgium. A pretty wee town that must have been brawl before the war. The beer too ain't bad. I'd much rather be down an ale with you though, boy. I'm off to the front in 2 days. Take care of yourself and say how do to the family. John McCormack. The knob is all that remains of this walking stick. The stick has been carefully sculpted, a souvenir of the trenches. Unfortunately, a broken walking stick is of no use to anyone. Latrines were generally housed outside in the yard in homes of all social classes, so during the night, bedpans were used. In well-to-do households, servants were charged with emptying these pans. A camera that captures 2 simultaneous images on glass plates, enabling relief images. Use of the camera was relatively widespread because the device was small and readily transportable. This formula is a description of what happens to soldiers' lungs when they inhale chlorine gas. Chlorine gas reacts with water in the lungs to produce hydrochloric acid, creating horrendous burns. Another endless day. For every life saved, there are so many lost. Those poor young men, mutilated, disfigured for life. I cannot abandon them, even if all I can do is hold their hands as they slip away.
Merci beaucoup.
governess revealed to her that her father, an eminent scientist, had been kidnapped by Baron von Dorf, who was eager to use scientific advances in warfare. Anna set out in pursuit of the Baron and encountered Emil and Freddy. Destiny brought them together. They had survived the enemy's wrath, their gunfire, bombardments, gas attacks. Now, with her father within reach, Anna wasn't going to let him slip away.
Stop, mademoiselle! Mademoiselle, je vois pas, mademoiselle!
Father has been captured by a German regiment and taken away in a Zeppelin. He who's so scared of heights. They probably know about his research. Please, Father, don't try to be a hero. Work for them. I don't want to lose you. I'm on his trail, and these two soldiers I met are after the Zeppelin as well.
Danke.
Albert!
Ik weigerte Asta dabei. Hey!
Life and death of the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin was effective at the start of the war, and in 1915, London suffered over 50 Zeppelin raids before Royal Naval Air Service intervened. The craft's weak spot was obviously its hydrogen-filled balloon. Hydrogen is lighter than air, hence its value to aviation. However, it is also highly inflammable, and the slightest spark sent the craft plummeting spectacularly groundward in a ball of flames. Of the 92 craft used during the war, 68 were destroyed. By 1918, there were 20 million war wounded, all countries included. Roughly 70% of injuries came from shrapnel and only 1% from bayonets. Facial injuries could result in having a jaw, nose, or eyes removed. But progress in surgery saved and patched up many victims of facial disfigurement and amputation, of which there were 200,000 post-war. A case containing a statuette of the Virgin Mary, another example of trench art. To overcome their boredom, soldiers would set to work transforming anything that came to hand. Unexploded ammunition, empty cartridges, and shell debris were all turned into day-to-day items and put to a more pacifist use. Letter from a soldier, June 14th, 1950. Dear Emma, we are on the retreat. Our position is unattainable. Don't worry, I'm still in good health. We are going to leave Reims to the enemy. Reims is a beautiful city. I hope all is well at home and you are taking good care of our parents. I hope the prisoners are working properly for you. See you soon, Siegfried. A broken P08 pistol, designed for German artillerymen. The P means parabellum, which refers to its 9mm ammunition. The word parabellum comes from the Latin si vis pacem, parabellum. If you want peace, get ready for war. These darts were dropped into trenches from zeppelins or aircraft. Due to the velocity on impact, Their heavy tips were capable of piercing through anything between them and the ground, including helmets and a soldier's skull. The nose cones of shells were not systematically destroyed and were very much sought after by soldiers because they contained large quantities of metal that could be recycled to make rings or pendants. Soldiers drew water directly from rivers and streams, but because of the rats and decomposing corpses, river and stream water brought a major threat of disease. Soldiers used a variety of products to disinfect water before drinking it, but the best solution was to boil it up.
Oui, bon chien. Voilà, viens. Allez, courage. Courage, Nico. Allez, voilà. Voilà, viens. Allez, courage. Pas mieux. Courage, Nico. Allez, voilà. Carl! Papa!
T'as envie? Il est avec le général. Love.
Allez, Carl, tiens bon. What? Allez, va.
Hey, Walt. Well, go now. Oh, shoot, Walt. Walt. Allez, Walt. Oui, bon chien. Walt. Psst. Oh, yeah. That's what.
Hey, whoa, get out.
Hey. Shh, that's it. Keep it up, yeah.
Whoa, go now. Whoa, shoot, whoa.
Merci, mon ami.
Ça va aller, allez. Émile? Non!
Victory had a bittersweet taste for Anna. Carl, seriously wounded, had been sent to a POW camp. Anna's father had disappeared with Baron von Dorf, and Emil was court-martialed for desertion. Cited for his bravery in Reims, Emil was fortunately pardoned and set free to go back to the front. February 21st, 1916. Winter had descended on the front. After joining back up with the army, Emil and Freddy were stationed near Verdun, suffering like many others from the harsh winter. That morning, the arrival of the mail raised spirits, but Marie's letter did not bring good news. In Saint-Miel, food was scarce, disease was rife, and the number of dead was growing. Out of this grim news, however, there was one ray of light. A photo of his grandson, Victor, standing on both feet and learning to walk.
Don't worry, Fred.
I'll never be able to thank Anna enough for saving Carl after the Zeppelin crash. Knowing that he's no longer at the front and that he's a POW has put my mind at rest. I'm so relieved he's safe from harm. I hope Marie is doing okay in St. Miel, despite the German occupation. How much luck can a guy have? There's this huge cathedral here. Makes me think of you. They sent me back to the army. It's not going to make my search any easier. I was so frightened when I saw the Zeppelin crash today. Fortunately, Father wasn't on board because the Baron had already taken him away by aircraft. I managed to save Emil's son-in-law before they sent him to a POW camp. His legs were in a critical state. I'll be going with him to make sure he's alright. As he grows, Victor reminds me more and more of Carl. Not a day goes by without me thinking of him. The Germans are requisitioning all our crops. There must be food shortages in Germany. I managed to hide some for next winter. I can't wait for this stupid war to end. Supplying millions of men at the front with enough food was a logistical nightmare. The diet was mainly composed of bread, rice, soup, and sometimes meat and dried vegetables. Food parcels from home were ambrosia for the troops. British soldiers had a ration of a pint of wine and a third of a pint of rum every day. One of soldiers' fatigue duties was to go behind the line with containers to fetch their company's rations. Sometimes food did not reach the front line and infantrymen could go without food and drink for several days. In over 18 months of combat, the front barely moved, as each side dug in and tried to claw back enemy positions. The War of Attrition turned 1915 into the bloodiest year, and civilians became hugely affected too. By late 1915, shortfalls in human and food resources began to make themselves felt, while ammunition shortages were especially problematic. Invented in 1874, barbed wire was already a common feature of trench protection in battle. But with the Great War's onus on trench warfare, it became widespread. Thousands of tons were deposited in no man's land. Both sides sought tools and strategies to overcome barbed wire, such as grappling irons and wire cutters. Intensive bombardment was deemed to be the most effective method, and the tactic became widespread. Dead soldiers putrefying on barbed wire remains one of the enduring images of the war, a powerful symbol of its violence. Verdun. Triggered by the Germans at dawn, February 21st, in the aim of penetrating Allied lines, the battle eventually lasted 300 days. Some key positions changed hands several times before the French finally prevailed. The battle produced the highest concentration of casualties, with 600,000 killed over 61 square miles. You could say 1 death for every 311 square yards. Britain had 6 war medals, the most issued of which were British War Medal, the Victory Medal, and the 1914-15 Star, and the 1914 Star. 6.6 million British War Medals were issued, 5.7 million Victory Medals, 2 million 1914-15 Stars, and 365,000 1914 Stars. A combination of the Star, Victory Medal, and War Medal was fairly commonplace. Over 2.5 million trios were issued, and earned the nickname Pipsqueak and Wilfred after the popular cartoon character in the Daily Mirror, a dog, a penguin, and a rabbit, respectively. Tobacco case made from shell casing. Empty munitions were often recycled. Some exploded shell materials were already aesthetically interesting. Otherwise, soldiers would rework their finds to create handy items. Tobacco was precious, so soldiers were eager to keep it dry. Many accounts from the trenches express soldiers' appreciation of the Christmas cigar, a special festive treat for the troops. Days in the trenches were long, and to overcome their boredom, soldiers would play cards, read, write, and create objects from materials they found. The Germans played scat, the French manille, and the Allies brag or pontoon, amongst others. A helmet with holes in it, filled with coal and wood used as a brazier. The item would have afforded some protection from the cold. Although helmets were made of metal, they only offered scant protection from bullets. Officers were issued with whistles to signal the soldiers when the charge. The sound of the whistle became synonymous with a journey into the unknown, when soldiers surged out of the trenches and into no man's land. Letter from a Tunisian soldier. 21 February 1916. Dear father, dear family, I am cold. The land we are defending is frozen and covered in snow. The ground is so iced up, it is harder than rock. We cannot dig. The cold is so intense that my hands are burning. I hope everything is fine back at the village, and you are still receiving half my pay. Tell me if you aren't. Ahmed. Although Morse code was already operational, due to technological problems, telephone communications were unreliable, so age-old techniques were used, such as drums, bugles, and colored pennants. November 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m., the end of the war was marked by a clarion call.
T'as la file qu'on est chuteuse. Pas de boule, pas pour toi.
Allez, oui.
Oh là là! Oh, oh.
My dearest daughter, I heard from Carl. His condition is stable. He is still in the prisoner camp south of Reims. I hope to finally get permission to visit him. Thank you for the photo. It means so much to me.
Restez calme, les gars.
Ready!
Precision cannon firing enabled Freddy and his regiment to reach the rear line unharmed.
Bravo, Freddy!
Emil, thank you very much, my friend.
The military hierarchy heard of their feats in battle and decided to decorate the two friends for their bravery. Emil received good news from Anna. Carl was recovering nicely. He was even walking again. Meanwhile, the battle for Verdun only grew longer and bloodier. The death toll was staggering, 70,000 per month. Almost one Frenchman and one German every minute, and it went on for 10 months, day and night. May 8th, 1916, Emil's squad was sent on a mission to take back Fort Douaumont, a strategic point in the German defense.
Yes, sir. Come on, Emil.
Knubbeln? Ja, proben Hansen, ne? Hallo. Ja, proben Hansen, ne?
Fort Dumont. Dumont was one of the symbols of the Battle of Verdun, and was exploited by both camps for propaganda purposes. The Germans seized the fort in February 1916, before it was seized back by the Allies in October 1916, with heavy losses. In the meantime, the fort was damaged by a huge explosion which killed almost 800 Germans inside. Rather than the work of some valiant heart, the explosion was caused by a neglected stove. The ensuing fire spread to the petrol and ammunition supplies. The Germans were the first to use flamethrowers in an assault on a previously held position in July 1915. Although the attack was expected, the use of the weapon came as a surprise and caused a large number of casualties. Its psychological impact was huge, but British troops soon learned to cope with the slow-moving operatives lugging heavy equipment and did not adopt the weapon themselves. French Army trench shovel. The shovel was too short to be of any real use digging trenches or tunnels. However, French soldiers sharpened the tool's blade to turn it into a weapon more effective than a bayonet. A concert from a program behind the lines, where entertainment was laid on for troops as in civilian life. Theaters and cinemas were also set up to boost troops' morale. There were also brothels that were regulated to prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. An empty wooden chest used as luggage by a German soldier. Suitcases were not widespread, and poorer soldiers left for war with their affairs in a knapsack or wooden crates. An iron ring bearing the inscription Gold gab ich für Eisen, offered in exchange for some precious item as part of a program to finance the German war effort. A gas stove for warming food or heating a room. Not always the most practical heating appliance to use when trying to heat a flamethrower fuel depot. The blueprint for Anna's father's latest invention, a 4-stroke engine. That's quite some machine. What on earth is it? This morning, shells came raining down on our sector. Freddy was out in front and was lucky to pull through. I had to play cannon boy to dig him out of there. I was awarded a medal, but I'd much prefer a leave of absence. I hope Carl is okay. It was such a relief to receive Marie's last letter. A meal saved my skin again today. What a deluge of shells. I got to write my younger brother. He's worried about me.
Emil! Hurry up! Save my breath. Hey, walk.
Good boy. You go, boy. Hey!
Sauhaufen! Kein Pardon! Los, 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 los! Kavime! Ach, der Wursteln! Knipp an der Wursteln! Schwupp ab, der
Hey, thank you very much. Run out.
Come, come, come!
Despite the fort's partial destruction, the Germans held their position. The mission was a failure.